You think pledging to a flag every morning is normal? It's not. In fact, almost no other country does it. But there's a reason why they drilled it into us so young. So the US loves to tell you that it's the freest country on earth, right? But freedom doesn't usually require daily oaths in the first grade. So here's the truth. Most countries don't even have a Pledge of Allegiance. Germany? No. France? Nope. Australia? No. Canada? Definitely not. Only 2 countries really did it. The US and the Philippines. The US literally colonized the Philippines and forced them to do it during American occupation. The pledge was created in 1892, but it blew up during the Cold War. They needed a way to scare kids into loyalty, make you believe that questioning America is the same thing as betraying it. So that's when they added the under God part in 1954. Because apparently loyalty wasn't enough. You needed divine approval too. So why does this matter? Because repeating something every single day before you even understand the words, that's not patriotism. That's programming. They didn't raise you to think critically. They raised you to pledge allegiance before you could even spell it. Freedom doesn't demand blind loyalty. Control does. And once you realize that the majority of the world doesn't do this same weird ritual, you'll start asking why we ever did.
Europeans have always been the worst colonizers. Let's make one thing clear. Not all empires were the same. Yes, conquest existed before Europe, but what Europe brought was a systematized apocalypse, a global, mechanized, extractive, and delusional machine built to erase, enslave, and rename the entire planet in its image. The Umayyads, the Abbasids, and the Ottomans colonized, but they didn't burn libraries to build stock exchanges. Baghdad's Beit al-Hikmah, or House of Wisdom, preserved Greek, Persian, Indian, and Chinese texts. Islamic expansion introduced algebra, hospitals, and multilingual court systems, not forced conversions by musket. Arabic became a lingua franca across empires, not by mandate, but by scholarship, commerce, and adaptation. Compare that to the Spanish, who reduced Mexican codices to ashes in Tenochtitlan, declared Nahuatl satanic, and forced Catholic confessions under torture. The Mongols built the longest contiguous empire in history. Yes, they killed, but they didn't erase. Genghis Khan's court had Chinese, Persian, and Muslim scholars side by side. They taxed knowledge instead of obliterating it. If you were a doctor, teacher, or artisan, you were protected. They built relay stations and free travel passes for scholars, not railroads to plantations. Contrast that with the Belgians in Congo, who cut off children's hands for not bleeding enough rubber out of trees, and never built a single university. The Ming dynasty's reach across Asia and Africa via Zheng He's treasure fleets brought porcelain, books, and medicine, not settler colonies. Chinese colonization in places like Vietnam did exist, but it included civil service exams, Confucian schooling, and food exchange, not sugar plantations and forced sterilization. Now compare that to the British, who called India their jewel, while creating over 30 million famine deaths through forced cash cropping and grain export during droughts. Yes, the Inca, Aztec, and Maya had conquest, but it was regional, symbolic, and seasonal. Tribute came in textiles, maize, and cacao, not slavery and amputated limbs. Sacred war, like Sochi Yao Yoto, was regulated by religious calendars and often ended in ritual rather than extermination. The Spanish responded by melting golden temples into bars, genociding 90% of indigenous populations, and naming towns after saints who never stepped foot on the continent. Europe didn't just conquer land, it conquered meaning, redrew maps, renamed rivers, invented race, mass-manufactured lies like terra nullius, turned people into property, culture into commodity, nature into capital. And then after 500 years of bloodshed, they wrote textbooks, calling themselves explorers. No Islamic caliphate ever created a global insurance market for enslaved human cargo. No Mongol horde ever renamed continents, burned genealogies, banned native languages, and then demanded tribute for the civilization they just annihilated. European colonialism wasn't just violent. It was uniquely annihilative, designed to erase the planet and rewrite it in their own rotting image. No empire before or since has done more to erase history, decimate the biosphere, and then demand a thank you note in return. Cope.
It's at a point now where I call overly murderous, violent, promiscuous, sexual, ignorant, drugged out music CIA music, because the amount that we get is not an accurate representation of the black population, and at one time it was. At one time, we had an equal mix of everything. We had an equal mix of party, an equal mix of give money music, an equal mix of fly music, an equal mix of sexy, political, conscious, soulful, like all different type of music, right? And we still have that amount of diversity of artists, but the amount of music that's making it up through the pipeline is only the ignorant categories, and that doesn't accurately represent our population. And who else would be behind that? Who else has infiltrated every black organization and culture since it's been established in the US? It only makes sense. That's why I call it CIA music, and I look at a lot of the artists that push that message as feds. They just work for the government. I still bump it, but I'm just aware of what it is, you know?
Incredibly dangerous moment for the country. It's a test of whether we're actually a freedom-loving people.
Let me hold your hands when I explain this. Traumatized people that have not even addressed a drop of their trauma don't want freedom. They don't even know how to want that. They want comfort. And comfort exists in the known. Psychologically speaking, we are less likely to do what you are calling us to do. The boomers and the Gen Xers have taught us very well to just be grateful, to have a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes on your back. That means that anything that threatens the safety of those three elements will not be considered. This is one of those examples where fear is stronger than love.
Number one, form an independent, civilian-powered investigative coalition. I'm talking experts, veterans, whistleblowers, journalists, watchdog orgs. Deputize the resistance. Build a real-time archive of corruption, overreach, and executive abuse. Make it public. Make it unshakable. Let the people drag the rot into light. If you can't hold formal hearings, hold public ones. If Congress won't act, let the country act. This isn't about optics. It's about receipts, because at some point, these people will be held accountable. And when that day comes, we'll need every name, every signature, every illegal order, every act of silence documented. You're not just preserving truth, you're preparing evidence for prosecution. The more they vanish people and weaponize data, the more we need truth in the sunlight.
It doesn't look like anything. You're allowed to drive wherever you want. It's America. They're just racist. It's okay. They're just racist. You're not allowed to drive around Winthrop if you're a minority.
Hi, Jake. How are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good. Hanging in there.
You guys still protecting pedophiles like Feely? Yeah, there you go. Have a great day. Fuck you.
Not having money to get out of jail is the leading cause of mass incarceration in the United States. 90% of the people sitting in Rice Street are only there because they cannot afford to bond out. We have people in jail because they're poor. A lot of those people have already served their time, so they're arrested for a crime that at most has 30 days in jail. So then they sit in jail for 6 months, waiting for a court date to then be sentenced to 30 days in jail, but they've already done 6 months in jail, and the only reason they've been sitting there is because they can't afford to bond out. We have essentially criminalized poverty. I know that my kids, if any of them ever ends up in a jail, I'm going to go there, and if there's a bond, we're going to pay it because we have that ability. But a lot of people don't. And those are the 90% of people that are sitting in the Rice Street jail.
You think you're watching a collapse, but you're watching a transfer of wealth, of power, of control. The headlines say recession, but those who lit the fire are already warming their hands. April 2nd, sweeping tariffs. Markets tank. Over $3 trillion wiped out. You lost value. They bought the dip. The middle class tightens its belt. The billionaire class tightens its grip. This isn't chaos. It's choreography, a deliberate destabilization. Because when the old world falls, the ones who brought it down decide what rises in its place. This was never about saving the economy. It was about reshaping society. Fewer masters, more dependence. This isn't nationalism, it's consolidation, a quiet merger of power, a silent dominion owned by no nation, answerable to no soul. Your savings bleed, your choices vanish, but theirs, they multiply. This was never about fixing the market. It was about flipping the board, turning your panic into their profit. They do not fear collapse, they require it. They summon it, because from the ashes of your world, they build what was written, not for you, but for them.